Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to present today. As she said, my name is Peter Zerhouni. I'm the CEO of Index Pharmaceuticals since 6 years now, and I'll give you an introduction here. So we are developing a drug to treat ulcerative colitis in order to be able to help patients like Felicia here live a normal life. Our lead asset is called cobitolimod, and we are currently advancing that into phase 3 for the treatment of moderate to severe ulcerative colitis, so the more difficult cases. Apart from cobitolimod, we have a broad portfolio of chemically similar assets from our so-called DIMS platform. These are little pieces of DNA that we can use to modulate the immune system via a receptor called toll-like receptor 9. We are listed on the Nasdaq First North here in Stockholm since 2016. And in the beginning of this year, we raised more than $60 million, 530 million Swedish, to finance phase 3 development of cobitolimod. Our current market cap is around $90 million, and our main shareholders after the rights issue are Link. This is Bengt Jolander, a very successful private investor in the Swedish life science sector. We have the Swiss life science specialist fund HBM. We have the Fourth National Pension Fund in Sweden, and we have Handelsbanken funds that together account for a bit around 40% of the total shares and capital. So ulcerative colitis, a difficult name, but it's a very debilitating disease with a high unmet medical need that is caused by a chronic inflammation of the colon, the large intestine, leading to ulcers. It comes in flares, and in between the flares you might have longer or shorter periods of remission. But when you're in a flare, in an active period, the patients suffer from the typical symptoms of blood and mucus mixed loose stools. They have to go to the toilet all the time. They have pain. They can also have extraintestinal manifestations, joint pain, etc. And they suffer a much lower quality of life than a healthy person. The current therapies, and there are some, have limited efficacy, particularly in the moderate to severe cases where we're working, and they are associated with severe side effects. So they're tough drugs. And we have a patient quote here from Felicia, 23 years old. Typically the disease debuts between 20 and 30 years of age, but then you have it for the rest of your life. There's no cure. Where she points to the difficulty of living with this disease because you don't know when it will strike. You can wake up one morning and be in terrible shape without notice. It's a high-value market. There are several products approved, and typically the treatment follows a stair or a step. You step up the treatment to tougher and tougher drugs, where you start with the old and cheap aminosalicylates, once invented here in Stockholm by Nana Schwarz at Karolinska Institute. Many patients need help by corticosteroids, or steroids, to get out of a flare. But a significant share of patients don't get well on those first 2 lines of treatment, and they need a 3rd-line treatment. And that's where we have some fairly tough drugs. These are typically immunosuppressants that push down the immune system to dampen the inflammation. And as such, they are naturally associated with increased risks of serious infections and also cancer. And this is where we intend to position cobitolimod. The current products there are high-priced, between $30,000 and $80,000 in the US and around $11,000 in Europe. And there are several drugs here that are selling for more than $1 billion per year in moderate to severe ulcerative colitis alone. Patients that cannot control it, or where the disease cannot be controlled with drugs, they end up in colectomy, where you surgically remove the whole colon, which is, of course, a very serious operation. And it's a solution to the acute problem, but it entails other problems. So this is where we come in then with cobitolimod as a first-in-class treatment for moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. We recently published the phase 2b study CONDUCT, where we met the primary endpoint with an excellent safety profile. And before that, we've done quite a bit of work in the clinic. So we have data from 4 previously completed clinical studies that support the efficacy and safety we then saw in the phase 2b. And we're now about to start phase 3. And cobitolimod's profile stands out. We have a competitive efficacy, well in line with the currently approved products and what's in late-stage development, but with a superior safety profile. So we've had a completely clean safety profile in our trials to date, and we've tried this in actually more than 400 subjects with inflammatory bowel disease. It's a local treatment. We give it as a rectal enema. You have a photo here of the bottle. It's a 50 milliliter solution. You take it rectally every 3rd week. So this is a very infrequent dosing. These patients are used to rectal treatments. They have a rectal disease. And the currently used rectal products are taken every day or several days per week. So for these patients, having an enema every 3rd week is not an issue. And we have a novel mechanism of action. This is a first-in-class. We're the only one that has a toll-like receptor 9 agonist in this indication. The good safety profile and the unique mechanism of action make this a very good candidate for combination therapy. There is more and more talk in the field that you need to combine several modern treatments to break through the inflammation in ulcerative colitis, and then you want at least one of them to be safe. So this is a good, an additional potential for cobitolimod. So all in all, we see a very significant commercial potential for cobitolimod, given this outstanding combination of efficacy and safety with a novel and unique mechanism of action. The phase 2b results were published in the Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology, which is one of the absolutely highest ranked journals in the field of gastroenterology. And the results were also presented at the main medical conferences by the investigator here, Raja Treya, who also won a prize actually at the American Gastroenterology College for Best Abstract. So it's been well received in the scientific community. And from a money perspective, we do address a significant potential market here. There are about 2 million patients, a bit more than 2 million patients in the world, well, not in the world, in the 7 major pharmaceutical markets that suffer from ulcerative colitis. A bit more than half of those, 60% or so, have moderate to severe ulcerative colitis, and more than half of those have left-sided ulcerative colitis that we can reach the inflammation with our current rectal mode of administration. And about half of those have actually failed conventional therapy, the 2 first lines of treatments I showed you. So that leaves us with 400 patients with moderate to severe ulcerative colitis failing conventional therapy. And if you assume a price in line with the most recently approved drugs, about $35,000 in the US and $11,000 in Europe, that leaves you with an addressable market of more than $9 billion. And our estimate, of course, we won't be alone in this market, but our estimate is that at a successful commercialization, we can reach more than $1 billion of annual sales. So with this data, we went to the regulatory authorities in the US, FDA, and in Europe, the EMA. And both agencies endorse that we now move forward into phase 3 studies in patients with moderate to severe left-sided ulcerative colitis. We've also received strong support from key opinion leaders. We've established a North American Advisory Board and a European Advisory Board with the top names in this field. And as one gastro company told us that our advisory boards are beyond reproach. So these are really the leading names in the field that helped us develop this phase 3 program, but they're also ambassadors for cobitolimod and Index in the field of gastroenterology. And we've conducted quite a bit of primary market research that supports the commercial potential. So we've talked to gastroenterologists, we've talked to patients, and we've talked to payers. And all of this points to a high market acceptance, a high willingness to prescribe, and the payers confirm that we can price in line with the recently launched third-line ulcerative colitis therapies that I alluded to earlier. So we are now very close to start the patient recruitment in the phase 3 program. It's a program that consists of 3 parts. We have 2 shorter studies, so-called induction studies, each 6 weeks. And we have 1 longer maintenance study, 1-year maintenance study for patients that respond to the treatment in those induction studies. But let's focus on the upper part of this panel, which is the first study, induction study 1, which will include about 440 subjects. They all have moderate to severe left-sided ulcerative colitis in a flare, and they have failed conventional treatment of one of the more modern alternatives. And we will have 3 different dose arms, 250 milligrams given at weeks 0 and 3, or 500 milligrams given week 0 and 3, or placebo given week 0 or 3. After about a third of the patients, we will do a blinded interim analysis to select which of these 2 active dose arms is the best, and then continue the study with that dose arm. And at the end, we compare cobitolimod, the best dose of cobitolimod, to placebo. And the primary endpoint in this study is clinical remission at week 6. Clinical remission meaning basically that you're symptom-free. So the patients come in, they go to the toilet all the time, it's blood, diarrhea, and we treat them only twice with this enema. And at week 6, we expect a large share of them to be symptom-free, and that's what we saw in the phase 2b study. Once we've read this study out and we have a successful outcome, then the plan is to start the second induction study, and the responders from both of these induction studies will then go into this 1-year maintenance study to show that we can prevent future flares. So the study design is based on our successful phase 2b study. It's the same patient population, same primary endpoint, etc. But we have thrown in an even higher dose than we had in phase 2b. So there we had 250 milligrams was the highest dose we tested, and now we're also trying twice that dose, 500 milligrams, with the hope that it can provide an even better efficacy than we've seen before without increasing the safety risk. This will be a global study. We have a few hundred sites we're looking at in over 30 countries. And to manage such a large project, we have hired a leading global CRO. They're called Parexel. It's one of the top 3 CROs in the world. It's also the CRO we worked with in the phase 2b study, so we know each other well, which makes the work go smoother. And we now have regulatory approval to start including patients in the US and in Sweden. So we have FDA and Swedish MPA approval, and we expect other countries to join soon. So we will start patient recruitment when the clinics are up and running after the summer, and also when we see that the restrictions from the pandemic are easing up. So we have good hope that it can happen really soon now. And then we expect 18 to 24 months to complete the study and read out the results. And then we can start the second study upon successful outcome. The financing for this first study is secured by the oversubscribed rights issue we did in the first quarter. So we have ample capital for this. So, in summary, the investment opportunity. Ulcerative colitis is a debilitating disease that causes major suffering and social economic costs. It affects young people, causes a lot of pain and suffering. Cobitolimod has blockbuster potential. There is a high unmet need for new, safe, and efficacious treatment options. And we see this has a blockbuster potential given the outstanding combination of efficacy and safety and a novel mechanism of action. And we're now advancing into phase 3. Patient recruitment will soon be initiated, and the financing is secured until the next readout of pivotal clinical data. So, thank you. We'll move to the questions.
Thank you. Very interesting to listen to you. I have two friends that have reached the top end of that stair, so in quite young ages. It's very debilitating for their lives, of course. There is, well, what is your view on the recent developments in this field of treatment? I mean, there's been things. What is your take on the industry that are working to work with these drugs?
So there is quite a bit of development going on, which is a sign that others, not only Index, considers this to be a very attractive indication, and that there is a high unmet medical need. However, there's been some spectacular failures, but also in the most recent months, we've seen really the spotlight turn to the safety. So FDA recently limited the use of some of these current products to last-line treatment, so after everything else, just before you remove the colon, that's when you can use them, because their safety profiles are so tough, and they've had to add the risk of cancer, cardiac effects, and death to their labels.
So how has this affected you?
So it's of course bad news for the patients, but for Index it's actually good news because we really stand out with a superior safety profile. As I said, we've had a completely clean safety profile to date in our clinical studies with a competitive efficacy. So we really see how we can get in front of the rest. I mean, why would you try something dangerous if you have a safe alternative that gives you the same efficacy? So that's really how we've seen this play out in our favor over the last year in the competitive landscape.
So for maybe there are people watching here that have relatives or family friends or anybody that they know that have this condition. So in the best of worlds, when could you have this drug on the market?
It will actually depend now on how fast we can recruit this study, and and then we have to do the second study. So I'm a bit unwilling to predict that now, but let's say we expect 18 to 24 months for this first study, and hopefully the second one is faster, and then we can start looking ahead to approval and launching of the product. So it's a little bit out, but it's definitely within reach now.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and best of luck.
Thank you very much.